Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth, the Education Coordinator for Marlene's Market and Deli. Tonight's special guest that we have with us is Neil Levin. He is the Senior Nutrition Education Manager for Now Foods and he is a clinically certified nutritionist and has a plethora of information to share with us tonight on minerals, what they are, and how the body uses them. Thank you so much, Neil, for being here.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I can share my screen now, right?
Good to go.
Okay. Bada bing. You can see him okay?
Looks great.
All right. Well, we're going to focus mostly on calcium, magnesium, but we are going to talk about elements in general and also some associated vitamins D and K especially, because they have an important role there. And these are some of my credentials. We're not going to spend a lot of time going through them, but this is my 49th year in the natural products industry, my 30th year as a clinical nutritionist. And just a couple of quick notes about the company I work for, Now Health Group with Now Foods is the largest family-owned business in the natural products industry. So we have family values and can make decisions based on long-term, what's good for the company and our customers, not short-term quarterly profits. And that's because our mission is to provide value, the best quality for the best price in both products and services that empower people to lead healthier lives. So without further ado, let's talk about mineral nutrients. You might be familiar with the periodic table. This is drawn from there, but it shows some of the minerals and elements that are necessary for health. So minerals are actually elements. They are non-carbon based because carbon is an element, but all the other minerals, say calcium, silica, magnesium, are actually inorganic chemistry. When we're measuring them, we use an inorganic chemistry method rather than organic chemistry because there's no carbon in most of the elements. So the nutrient forms that we call minerals are essential for life, but they're correctly classified as elements. All living cells require many elements, but there's four basic ones: oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and carbon. And you're probably familiar with the periodic table. There are different versions of it. This is one version of it from PubChem, from the National Library of Medicine. And you could see on the left here where I focus on calcium and magnesium. And you notice the molecular weights, 20 for calcium, 12 for magnesium. That is where that 2-to-1 ratio of calcium magnesium comes from, is it's about a 2-to-1 ratio if you have one molecule of each. That's why they came up with that 2-to-1 ratio. It's not exact, but approximate of one molecule of each. So minerals are present on Earth. They're in the soil and water. And plants get them from soil. If you ever noticed for fertilizers, you have the 3 numbers on them, NPK. That's nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Those are 3 mineral elements. Humans get them from eating plants or other animals, sometimes rock powders. And the mineral content, what's in the local soil and water, varies by region. There are, for example, regions that are very high in selenium, others that are very low in selenium, regions that are high in various other minerals or low in other minerals. So it can vary based on where you are. And if you're in an area that's low in an essential mineral in the soil and water, you might not get enough from eating locally, which is interesting. And food processing, of course, can rob our foods of not only minerals, but also vitamins. So supplementation is a convenient way to make sure we get enough of these essential nutrients. Now, minerals are required for skeletal structure, which includes our teeth, our nails, things like that. They're essential components of body tissues and fluids, and we need minerals for all of our body systems. You've heard of electrolytes, for example. Those are minerals. So yeah, they are required for many things in fluid form as well as solid form. Almost every function of our bodies is dependent on mineral nutrients, either as major factors or cofactors in the biochemistry. So when we're talking about minerals, we're often talking about mineral complexes. So one term that you probably hear a lot is the term chelated. Chelated is the Greek for the word claw, which means a bond. So we really call these chelated forms pre-acidified forms or pre-digested forms. And because they have an acid attached to them, they are less alkaline. It'll have a lower pH, more acidic, and are more dilute than crude forms like calcium carbonate. Has a lot more calcium in there than calcium citrate. Now, carbonate is a strong antacid. So that's another differential, because when it's alkaline, it's a better antacid. And if you look at, Tums or some of these antacid formulas, we make an antacid formula as well. We're using calcium carbonate as the base. So the chelated forms are more bioavailable. They're combinations of elemental minerals with weak acids. They're pre-digested. They're typically considered pre-acidified, which mimics the digestive process for non-pre-acidified minerals if you take them and have to digest them. And these combinations are also more soluble. Their bioavailability tends to go up. And very importantly, they can be absorbed even by people with poor stomach acid who otherwise would have problem absorbing calcium and other nutrients. Which means they can also be taken with or without meals, where the non-acidic forms have to be taken with meals, and you need good stomach acid as well. So let's look at some of these forms that you will find in products, especially supplements. Carbonate. You can have calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate. They're bonded to carbonic acid, which is a form of carbon. This is the form you'll often find in rock powders, shells. Coral calcium has a lot of calcium carbonate. There's also calcium phosphates. There's other inorganic forms that don't have acids that are basically two elements bonded together. So those are the forms that are hard to digest. They're hard to absorb. They require stomach acid to split apart those two elements, calcium and carbon, for example, or calcium and phosphate in some cases, and recombine them to the acids that you would find in a supplement. So historically, like dolomite would be a form that has calcium, magnesium in roughly a 2-to-1 ratio. That's something we were selling in health food stores when I started in the industry 49 years ago. Wow, a long time ago. So we didn't have all these chelated forms back then. The carbonate is alkaline. It's not acidified. It's not pre-digested. It requires adequate stomach acid for digestion. You would have to take it with a meal to properly absorb it. It will form chelates in the stomach with acids from the food, assuming you have food with it and sufficient stomach acid. So by contrast, we have a chelated form, the citrate, calcium citrate, magnesium citrate. These elements, calcium or magnesium, are bonded to citric acid. This is a popular source. They are non-alkaline. In other words, they're pre-acidified and pre-digested. They do not require stomach acid, can be taken with or without meals. Another form that's fairly popular, not quite as popular as the citrate, is the malate. Malic acid, which isn't the food acid that you would get from eating apples, for example. I'm sure you got lots of apples up there coming up this time of year. I've been in Olympia and Portland, when it's apple season and go to the farmers markets, there's 150 different varieties of apples. Well, the acidity in there is malic acid. And so malic acid can be combined with calcium or magnesium to make calcium malate or magnesium malate, which is even more popular than the calcium malate. Sometimes they're combined. If you look at studies, you might find citrate malate combinations of calcium especially. It's a popular source. It's non-alkaline. It is pre-acidified like the citrate. It's pre-digested, does not require stomach acid, so it can be taken with or without meals. Gluconate is another pre-acidified one. It's not common in your supplements anymore, except for potassium gluconate or zinc gluconate. But it has the same qualities as other ones. It's a mineral bonded to an acid. It's non-alkaline. It's pre-acidified, pre-digested with or without meals. Glycinate, same thing, except it's bonded to the amino acid glycine. It's common in the Albion TRAACS products, which are that's an acronym for the real amino acid complex system. So what they've done is Albion has actually done microscopic photos to show that the acid and the mineral are actually bonded together and not simply blended together. And some companies will sell blends that are not what they call fully reacted together to form a compound that's bonded. You can blend, for example, calcium carbonate and citric acid, and you can actually get higher levels of calcium percentage-wise in a product, but it's not bonded, it's not pre-acidified, it still requires digestion, stomach acid. And the form of glycinate, which is popular especially for trace minerals and for magnesium. This is, the one we're selling is truly non-alkaline, pre-acidified, bonded together, chelated, a true chelate, fully reacted. So it does not require stomach acid, can be taken with or without meals. And other forms you might find include the aspartates with aspartic acid, another amino acid. Lactate, which is using lactic acid. The oxide or chloride, which are not chelated. I mean, technically they are attached to something, but they're not pre-digested, they're not pre-acidified. The chloride is fairly well absorbed though, because it is a salt and it's very soluble. The ascorbate is vitamin C as the acid, and that's actually a nice form. Calcium ascorbate, which is about 9 or 10% elemental calcium. You take a gram of that and you're getting maybe 90 milligrams of well-absorbed calcium with it. The picolinate, which you'll usually find in zinc or chromium, that's actually one of the forms that you get in mother's milk, for example. And USDA actually pioneered research in that. Alpha ketoglutarate, which is a Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle metabolite, which is sometimes used in some for energetic effects. So what the mineral, the element, is bonded to in the chelate has an effect. It affects absorption, bioavailability, efficacy, where it goes in the body. That's actually called a transporter. So it does matter what you're getting, and the forms that have the acids, not the oxide or the chloride, are pre-digested, pre-acidified, can be taken with or without meals. The chloride can be taken without meals because it's a soluble salt, and it doesn't require chelation in the same way. So adding a chelator is a transporter. So if you bond, for example, magnesium to the amino acid taurine, the taurine tends to carry the magnesium to the heart, where taurine is used a lot. And so it kind of gives a preferential pathway of where that mineral is going to go in the body and which parts of the body it's going to nourish. So let's look at some of the calcium forms. We know that calcium is used for dental and skeletal structures. That's actually the only approved benefit of calcium is bone and dental health. And that's what the RDA is based on, not on other benefits of calcium. Calcium is used by heart and muscles and other things, but it's solely based on bone and dental health. We also need it for clotting, for hormones, for various signaling. This is an essential element that we have to get from our diet. And bones and teeth are actually live tissue. Bones more than teeth, because the tooth enamel ends up being kind of a semi-permanent thing. But bones are constantly remodeling. It's estimated that the tissue in bones remodels about every 7 years. All the material in there gets replaced. And bone is living tissue. It's not like the skeletons you see in the science classes hang in there or in the museums. There's actually collagen and lots of soft tissues in the bones. There's the marrow in the middle that are making blood cells and things. So bones are living tissue that's a combination of soft and hard tissues. So there's a constant state of breaking down and rebuilding the bones. During the early part of our life, we accumulate more calcium. And during early and mid adulthood, it's even between accumulating calcium and having it break down and be reabsorbed into the body. And later on in life, the resorption outpaces deposition, which means we're losing calcium from the bones and there's health concerns. Having enough calcium intake both earlier in life when we're accumulating it and storing it, and later in life when we're tending to lose it, helps us maintain a good balance. So there are some approved health claims for calcium by the FDA, which they don't often approve a lot of nutrient claims for supplements or foods. They recently raised the daily value, which is based on RDAs and RDIs, what the Institute of Medicine comes out with these different tables for different ages and things. And you could see there's a range on here of recommended calcium intake by age, by gender, by if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. So the FDA looks at those numbers and comes up with their own number that's called the daily value. That's the number you see on food labels, including dietary supplement labels. It's based on this complex chart on the left, but it actually comes up with a single number to put on labels. And that's why there's a disconnect sometimes between the RDAs and the daily values. The daily values are what's on the labels. RDAs are what the Institute of Medicine from National Institutes of Health comes up with. And they come up with all these different numbers for different groups. So this is an authorized health claim that calcium, vitamin D, and osteoporosis calcium and vitamin D have a role in helping prevent osteoporosis. So if you meet the requirements of this health claim, when there's a bunch of details to that, you can actually make that claim on a label. So here's some model claims. Adequate calcium through life as part of a well-balanced diet may reduce the risk of osteoporosis. Similar wording like that. You're allowed to say on a label, and you don't need that disclaimer that's on virtually every dietary supplement label that the FDA has not reviewed this, and it's the product is not intended to prevent or cure whatever any kind of problem. You can actually make a claim on products like this because the FDA has approved it. Also, calcium and vitamin D. Adequate calcium and D throughout life, part of a well-balanced diet, may reduce the risk of osteoporosis, or along with physical activity. These are some samples that the FDA has posted. And then there's another category, qualified health claims, not quite as strong and require more disclaimers. Some evidence suggests calcium may reduce the risk of hypertension, high blood pressure, but FDA has determined that the evidence is inconsistent and not conclusive. You can put that type of claim on the label if you want to say, here's what it does, but the FDA doesn't really believe it. So a lot of companies don't tend to use these qualified health claims. Or some evidence suggests that calcium supplements may reduce the risk of colon rectal cancer, but FDA determined that the evidence is limited and not conclusive. So they're saying there is some evidence, it's just not proven. So let's look at some of the calcium forms and some of the products that result from those forms. This is a chart I made. It's a work in progress. It's still being built, but it shows different forms of calcium and the typical percent of elemental calcium in the material. For example, when you're looking at calcium ascorbate, there's one that contains water and one that doesn't. The granular is actually compacted more. You're looking at 9 to 10% elemental calcium in calcium ascorbate, which is your typical non-acidic buffered vitamin C. So if you're taking something that has 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C and it's from calcium ascorbate, you're typically getting 90 to 100 milligrams of calcium with it. The calcium carbonate, 40% elemental calcium. And when you look below that on the fourth line to calcium citrate, you see there's 21% is the maximum amount of calcium if they're truly bonded. Now, let's look over at the absorption rate for those two. Calcium carbonate averages 26% absorption, and it's got twice as much calcium by weight, and 22% absorption rate on the average for calcium citrate, which is a lower rate. But look into the parentheses. Your absorption rate for calcium citrate in studies ranges between about 12 and 31%. And for calcium carbonate between about 14% and 64%. So if you have good stomach acid and you take it with a food, you could actually get calcium carbonate with twice as much calcium by weight and absorbs up to twice as well as calcium citrate for those individuals. Now look at the comments on the right. Calcium carbonate is insoluble at a neutral pH. It has to have acidity. It has to be taken with food and have a good stomach acid, or you don't get any absorption. On the other hand, the calcium citrate you could take between meals, etc. So you're taking a more dilute product and calcium citrate that's got half as much calcium by weight. You want to get a gram of calcium, you need to take 2 grams of that. Or 21%, you actually have to take about 5 grams of calcium citrate to get 1 gram of elemental calcium, is how the math works out. And for the same thing, you could take about, I haven't calculated it out, but something like 2 point something grams of calcium carbonate and still get a gram of calcium, 2.4 or whatever it is. So you can take a lot less if you have good stomach acid and take it with a meal. Now, other forms you can find is calcium hydroxyapatite. That's the form you get in bones. So bone meal is calcium hydroxyapatite. Hydroxyapatite is also something that's sold as a well-absorbed bone matrix. They're actually taking not just the calcium part, but the entire bone matrix, including the collagen. And that's what some of these products are, the hydroxyapatite products. And that lowers, even though it's a calcium triphosphate in there, is actually the form, you end up with about 24% elemental calcium, well below calcium carbonate, because there's other materials in there and other forms. It's a phosphate, not a carbonate. We don't really have good absorption numbers on that. Calcium lactate is a low percentage calcium, about 14%, but it's got about a 32% absorption rate. Now, the Aquamin calcium is an interesting material, because I actually formulate a lot with that. It's from a seaweed, so it's a plant source. It's not a rock source like normal calcium carbonate. And it's very different physically from regular calcium carbonate. For one thing, it's 30% elemental calcium instead of 40 because it contains other minerals. It also has a honeycomb matrix to it. I'll show you on another slide, which makes it more soluble than regular calcium carbonate. It also has a lot of trace minerals, so it actually has some benefits on bone health, on walking distance for people who have a hard time walking, some very interesting qualities. And because it's a plant source, it's lower in lead and heavy metals than other forms of calcium. So that's one reason why I tend to formulate with it. It's harvested from seaweed that's harvested off the coast of Iceland. It's then processed into a powder in Southern Ireland in County Cork. And you get an interesting material out of that. Now, coral calcium is the last one I'm going to really talk about here. It is a coral calcium that's 40% elemental, but it contains some weird isotopes of hydrogen that are even more alkaline than calcium carbonate. So it raises the pH quite a bit more. And it becomes a better antacid than regular calcium carbonate, which is the normal form you will find in antacid products. So it's very interesting in that regard. We're actually getting our coral calcium from the Caribbean. We used to get it from Okinawa, but after the Fukushima nuclear accident, we were detecting radiation signatures in our materials, and we had to change suppliers. Now, we are using coral calcium harvested above ground that's being mined off on the shore, rather than hosing it, vacuuming it from the ocean floor, which actually disrupts the ecosystem dramatically. That's not an eco-friendly way to produce it. So here's some examples of some of our calcium products. You can see a variety of forms there. So if it's calcium carbonate, or including the hydroxyapatite or the coral calcium, take it with food or immediately after eating. It's absorbed more effectively with food in the stomach. The citrate, lactate, gluconate, the ones with the acids attached to it, are well absorbed anytime. Always take calcium with plenty of water, and try not to take more than about half a gram, 500 milligrams of elemental calcium, just the calcium fraction, at one time. So if you want to take 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day, take it in 2 divided doses for best absorption. So here's a couple of different forms of calcium carbonate. So as I mentioned, here's some of the calcium chelates that bond the alkaline calcium to a weak acid to form a stable, more neutral compound that is pre-digested, pre-acidified. And here's some of those forms. So you can see what they look like on a label. Citrate, ascorbate, lactate, those are all acids, which means they're non-acidic. I mean, we're buffering these things by mixing an acid and an alkaline product. So I mentioned the red mineral algae. It's from a calcified seaweed. It actually has a few percent magnesium, enough to make a label claim, and 72 trace minerals, which is part of the reason for its benefits and why it's 30% elemental calcium instead of 40. But still, when I formulate with multivitamins, for example, and I want to put this calcium in there, if I put calcium citrate, I'm putting something that's 21% calcium. I have to use bulk, it's more dilute. You have to use more material. With the this form, it's 30% elemental calcium, so it's almost 50% stronger in terms of how much you use. So if I needed to use a gram of material in one product, I could use quite a bit less and get the same amount of calcium, because this is 50% roughly higher calcium content. It also contains several percent magnesium and the trace minerals, as I mentioned. Uh, with this mixture, there's a boost because of the trace minerals in there work very well. And looking at the electron microscope, you could see a difference in structure from mined minerals. You could see the honeycomb structure that makes it more porous and more bioavailable, more soluble. Because it's a vegetable cell, it's not a rock. It's rock-like. So some of the claims are preservation of bone structure and strength, even on a high-fat Western diet. Helps maintain bone density, mineralization and maturization of bone cells, and bone mineralization with vitamin D. And here's the effect of walking distance. If you look at the top line that has the red, that's the Aquamin. And it actually works better than glucosamine, which is the orange line. Isn't that interesting? The walking distance is greater. So we do sell it as a powder, which has calcium, and here's the naturally occurring magnesium, and it does contain the trace minerals, but you know it's not the 2-to-1 ratio of cal mag or anything. That's the natural ratio that's in this material. And this is the one that has the vitamin D added. It's a vegetarian formula. Again, it's got 1 gram to 80 milligrams of magnesium. So, you know, that magnesium's a bonus. It's not added. That's actually the one I give my family, by the way. My wife and daughter will use this one. And magnesium. Same thing, magnesium is in the human body. It's essential for health. It's involved with calcium and skeletal health. The last estimate I saw was about 360 biochemical processes in the body that are dependent on magnesium status, cardiovascular health, immune, muscle, lipids. If you're eating, let's say, flax oil or the omega-3 that's ALA, which would be in chia seeds, walnuts, etc., you cannot turn it into EPA and DHA in the body if you don't have magnesium, because that enzyme is magnesium dependent. If you're taking vegetable oils, you want to convert your regular vegetable oils into GLA or CLA. That also requires the magnesium dependent enzyme delta 6 desaturase. And even making arachidonic acid, which is needed in the brain and other tissues, it's not something you typically take as a supplement. That is a fatty acid that's produced using that same enzyme. So all this fat metabolism is magnesium dependent. Here's your RDAs for magnesium. And you can see there's a range there. The daily value was recently raised from 400 to 420 milligrams, which is the high end, which is really what adults would be using for men. But the labels don't distinguish between age and men and women and different attributes like that. FDA really wants a single number, and they come up with what they think is a good compromise. That's what daily values are on labels. Higher magnesium intake from both diet and supplements is associated with a 27% lower risk of developing metabolic syndrome in healthy women. What is metabolic syndrome? It's a cluster of 5 symptoms that occur together. And if you have 3 of them out of range, it increases your risk of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and fatty liver disease. By the way, it's not on here. So what are the 5 things that are the risk factors? High blood pressure, high blood sugar, excess waist size, waist circumference, low HDL cholesterol, and high triglycerides. 3 out of the 5 out of range, you're at risk for doubling your risk of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, fatty liver disease at a minimum. And high magnesium intake lowers the risk. Here's some of the magnesium products. I actually developed the magnesium transporters formula there, which is something we'll talk about. And here's a little chart like I had for calcium on magnesium. We're looking at magnesium running on the citrates around 16% elemental, which means if you want to get a gram, you have to take 6 grams of this material, the magnesium citrate. But if you're taking magnesium oxide, you'd have to take less than 2 grams of material to get the same 1,000 milligrams, because it's 60% instead of 16%. What's the absorption rate? They're about equal. Magnesium oxide is insoluble in water, but it's 43% soluble in hydrochloric acid, stomach acid. If you have good stomach acid, magnesium oxide is great. If you have bad stomach acid, it ain't. It's that simple. Just like the carbonates on the calcium. So magtine, the one that's used for the brain, is about 7% elemental. Magnesium ascorbate, another form of vitamin C, is about 7% elemental. The aspartate is 22%. That's one of the higher chelated forms, but most of them are in the teens. The magnesium taurinate, which is often used for the heart, is 9% elemental magnesium. So I don't have solubility on all these absorption rates because I haven't found the studies yet. Even on, here's a couple examples of the kind of studies I'm looking at to try to get this data. So it's a work in progress. It's not done. Magnesium transporters, I wanted to come up with a formula that combined as many of our chelated forms, these pre-acidified, pre-digested forms, as possible. The one we did not add in here is the threonate, the magtine, because it's a trademark ingredient that's very expensive. And I wanted to have not just 1%, 2% of some of these and mostly one form. I wanted all of them to be double-digit amounts in here, a significant amount of every one of these, so that you have the taurinate for the heart, you have the malate for the muscles, you have the aspartate for energetics. These things are actually doing something in the body. So these are the ones combined for all but that one trademark, patented, expensive form, all combined together. This is the one I take, and this is the one I give to my family. Now, these are the traditional CalMag caps. We actually give you some ratios on there. A lot of companies don't. 80% calcium carbonate, 10% citrate, 10% malate. Same with the oxide citrate malate for the magnesium. We are using chelated forms, fully reacted forms of zinc, copper, manganese. We are adding trace minerals, and there is some vitamin D in there. So, this is a good form, but you really want to be taking this with a meal and have good, decent stomach acid to be using this form. Now, the calcium magnesium soft gels, again, it's 3 soft gels to get a gram, which isn't bad, and 500 milligrams of magnesium and 10 milligrams of zinc. These are predominantly non-chelated forms, and it has some vitamin D, but it really should be taken with a meal. The CalMag DK, though, uses calcium citrate and magnesium oxide. So it's kind of a hybrid, and it has vitamin D3, and it has the MK4 form of vitamin K2. If you see vitamin K2 on a label, and it does not specify a form like MK7, the generic form is MK4. MK4 is the active form in the body. It is not well absorbed. I'll go into that in a minute. Magnesium and magtine, this is the one I mentioned. It was developed by UCLA. I'm sorry, this was developed by MIT. And this is one that delivers magnesium past the blood-brain barrier. It's very soluble, very bioavailable, but it's got a small amount of magnesium. You're taking 2 grams of material to get 144 milligrams of elemental calcium, which means it's about 7-point-something% elemental calcium, magnesium, I mean. but it helps regulate the neuronal synapses and the stability and adaptability of our neurons. It calms and stabilizes the nerves, especially in the brain. It's a magnesium salt of threonic acid. Threonic acid's actually the stuff in ester C that helps it absorb better and stuff. So it has some benefits. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. It increases magnesium better than other forms of magnesium. And when they compared it to magnesium chloride, magnesium citrate, magnesium glycinate, magnesium gluconate in a study, they found that the magtine, the top line, crossed the blood-brain barrier and was found in the cerebral spinal fluid at higher levels than any of the other forms. Magnesium glycinate and milk was number 2, by the way. But only magtine had a significant effect in passing the blood-brain barrier. So here's a 12-week randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled human clinical study on cognitive ability, significant improvements in different composite scores of cognitive abilities, and significant improvement versus placebo, as this chart indicates, over both 6 weeks and 12-week period, with an increase over time. Improvement in trail making test, executive function, how well the brain works. Improvement was equivalent to a 9-year reduction in brain age with 12 weeks of supplementation and reducing stress and tension. Now let's look at a couple of the nutrients you need with calcium and magnesium. Vitamin D you can get from certain foods, animal foods, certain mushrooms, and fortified foods, as well as sunlight. Here's your RDA on there, which ranges, labels are switching from international units to micrograms because the FDA no longer believes that they should use international units. They want to do it by weight, which, hey, look, there it is. So when you're looking at 400 IU, it's now 10 micrograms. 1,000 IU is 25 micrograms. 5,000 is 125. The new daily value is 800 IU, which is equivalent to 20 micrograms. Now you can produce vitamin D in the skin. Ultraviolet B rays convert cholesterol to pre-vitamin D that converts to vitamin D. That's transported to the liver. It actually requires conversion in the liver and the kidney. The farther north you are, the less you can produce it. Darker skin pigment, winter season, sun avoidance, sunblock, scar tissue all interfere with vitamin D production. Here's your sunshine calendar. You're in Seattle, which is about the same distance north as Chicago. You could see January, February, November, December, you cannot make vitamin D. And why is that? Look at this little diagram on the right, the shadow rule. See that little sun in the angle? When your shadow is longer than you are tall, you cannot make vitamin D. That's the shadow rule. If you're 5 feet tall and your shadow is 6 feet long, you cannot make vitamin D. You could be out there at high noon, stark naked, no sunblock, light skin. It doesn't matter. You cannot make vitamin D. If you're 5 feet tall and your shadow's 3 feet long, you can make vitamin D. Doesn't matter what time of year, but it actually does, because when the sun's too shallow in the sky, the UVB rays get filtered out by the atmosphere and they don't reach your skin. That's why you need the sun to be at least a 45-degree angle, which means your shadow and your height have to be at least the same height, and preferably the shadow shorter than your height to make vitamin D. So if you're looking at the summer, June, July, August, you need about 25% of your body exposed for 10 minutes if you're light skinned, 45 minutes if you're dark skinned. When you're looking at the orange, which is in the spring and part of the fall, this time of year, it doubles those numbers. So there is not enough sunlight to make adequate amounts of vitamin C from about late September to late March. You can only make vitamin D from late March to late September when you're this far north. There's very few foods that contain vitamin D. Oily fish, and they have to have their livers, so small fish especially. And of course, cod liver oil, but not regular omega-3 fish oil. Wild caught salmon has about 4 to 5 times as much vitamin D as farm raised salmon, by the way. Vitamin D is, its RDA is based on calcium and phosphate and bone mineralization, but it has other roles. Cell growth and cell differentiation and immune function are not what the RDA is based on, and they require higher levels. Experts think that 800 to 1,000 IU, which is now 20 to 25 micrograms, is an optimal amount without sun exposure as a minimum. It's recommended to supplement that amount in dark-skinned people, people veiled and covered, institutionalized, elderly, should routinely take at least 800 IU a day. And higher doses if you have fat absorption problems, including gallbladder issues, obesity, or other things that enhance vitamin D breakdown. If your starting serum level is low, then you can raise it by taking a lot of vitamin D. The rise per 1,000 IU is greater when it's low than when it's sufficient. At about 88 nanogram per milliliter, you stop making vitamin D. The body stops. With sunlight, you cannot overdose because your skin will tan and burn and stop making vitamin D. Your enzymes in your body will break down vitamin D. 88 is about the maximum you could achieve without taking extraordinary doses through supplementation or medical intervention. On the other hand, how much do you take a day? If you want to raise the levels and get the serum levels up, it's about 8 or 10,000 units that you really start to see that increase. At lower doses like 400, 1,000, you really are maintaining. You're not increasing your serum levels at that level. Now, what's the difference between D2 and D3? There is no difference at nutritional levels. There is a difference at extraordinary medical dosing, but there is no difference between D2 and D3 on how it affects on the body at normal levels such as 1,000 IU daily. And National Institutes of Health report that both forms differ chemically, but they both are equivalent to cure rickets, the deficiency disease, and most steps in the metabolism and action of D2 and D3 are identical. There's really no difference at nutritional dosing. It's that 50,000 units once a week that there's a difference, or taking hundreds of thousands of units. That's where the difference shows up, not at the lower doses. So the effect is lost if you, the difference is lost if you take it every day. But if you take a huge dose on occasionally, like go to a doctor's office and get a shot, that's where there's a difference. Let's look at vitamin K lastly. It's used for calcium absorption and transport. One way to look at it is vitamin D helps you absorb calcium. Vitamin K helps you move it to where it's going in the body. So it doesn't just sit around and deposit in the arteries or other areas where you don't want it. You need vitamin K for strong bone matrix, for teeth, for cardiovascular health. Vitamin K can help maintain bone mineral density, and K and D do work synergistically on bone density, largely by vitamin D increasing absorption, vitamin K helping to transport it where it's going. Here's your adequate intakes for vitamin K, which is like an RDA, and the daily value was increased recently from 80 to 120 micrograms in the last year or two. So that's even higher than any level here. They took the highest level for men and made that the recommended amount for everybody on labels. Now, they made another change on the labels. Vitamin K2 is no longer included in the RDA or the daily value. So they're now separated on the label. If you ever look at a supplement label, the essential nutrients with daily values are in the first section, and the nutrients without daily values are in the second section. And that means that a vitamin K2 is no longer combined with vitamin K1 in one number, and they're not in adjacent lines on the label. They're totally separate, like they're totally different things. Now, what's the difference? About 90% of what we get in the diet is vitamin K1, which you largely get from greens and grains. About 10% is vitamin K2, which is typically in the form of MK4, menaquinone 4. And K2 is found in fermented foods. That's what you get when you're eating kefir and sauerkraut and those kind of things, kimchi. They're both effective in different ways. They're both in the food supply. MK7 is the newest form that was found in a fermented soybean called natto in Japan. And some people don't like soybeans, so now they're making it from chickpeas as an alternative. It's a culture, though. It's a fermentation, so they're adding the same natto culture to beans, just different type of beans. So they're still producing MK7. It's just produced by the fermentation on a different medium, different bean. How does MK7 work? By increasing our levels of MK4. It's used for arterial health to help get calcium out of the arteries and keep arteries flexible. Now, here's a chart from a study. And if you look at it, the red, and we're actually looking at the area under the curve, not the absolute numbers. So you can see it's a fairly small amount under the curve for the red, which is your K1. That's how much gets absorbed and the peak. The green MK4 is even smaller. That area under the curve is very low. But your MK7, the black line, is very broad and long, and that area is many times greater. That means that the bioavailability of MK7 is much greater than MK4, the other common form of vitamin K2, and much greater than vitamin K1. And since MK7, once it's in the body, it has a very long half-life and it converts slowly into MK4, you get a ton more MK4 by taking MK7 than you would from taking MK4. Now, there's a couple other nutrients we should talk about, folic acid and vitamin B12. B12 seems to increase the osteoblast proliferation, which means stimulating bone formation. B12 deficiency with folic acid deficiency increases homocysteine levels, interferes with collagen cross-linking. It makes collagen more fragile, and that increases the fragility of bones. So high homocysteine is a risk factor for bone fractures, fragile bones, weak bones, bones that don't have enough calcium in there, et cetera, because not enough B12 or folic acid. If you take B12 and folic acid, and it does not have to be methylfolate, folic acid does this too, it will lower homocysteine and help to normalize the collagen structures. Now, body pH and bone matrix. This is an area that has not been explored very well. Body chemistry is very sensitive to pH, the acid-base relationship. It has to be maintained within strict limits. If what you eat generates acidity, your body has to neutralize the blood to keep the pH at a more neutral area. So it depends on the acid forming ability of foods, which is not what you're going to think. Calcium is typically used to neutralize the extra acid, and it might leach it from the bones if you don't get enough calcium in your diet and you're not eating enough alkaline forming foods. So when the blood gets too acidic, the body's going to neutralize it even if it has to suck it out of the bones, is what it means. So not enough calcium, bone loss. pH of the blood is about 7.4. And you measure urine pH, and if you're measuring it and it's below 7, that's a problem. You need alkaline forming food components. But the food is not alkaline. It's the citrates and malates and the stuff we're using to chelate minerals that make the body more alkaline. So ironically, taking lemons or limes make your body more alkaline because they contain citric acid. Citric acid provokes the body to make these alkaline compounds. So you need a non-processed food, plant-based diet. So it's not theoretical. It's not based on pH in areas of the digestive tract. It's based on the effect of pH on blood chemistry, the foods on blood chemistry. So carbon dioxide, electrolytes, and weak acids are the 3 factors that regulate pH in the blood. All changes, this is from the National Institutes of Health, by the way, all changes in blood pH occur from changes in these 3 variables. So when you're looking at foods, which ones are acid forming? On the right, you're looking at meats, certain grains, and certain legumes. On the left, you're looking at most produce, most fruits, most vegetables, lentils, most spices, most herbs and seasonings, most seeds and nuts are alkaline forming. This is a very simplistic way to look at it, but you want typically an 80% alkaline forming, 20% acid forming part of the diet. Here's a chart you can get online, acid alkaline body chemistry balance. You can get this actually if you go to honestnutrition.com and type in alkaline, you can get this chart. And you can see, just look at the bottom where it says citrus fruit. Lime is the most alkaline forming because it has the most citric acid. Coconut is lowest acid, it's almost neutral. Orange, lemon, grapefruit, lime, in that order, they go from lowest alkaline, more acidic, to most alkaline, less acidic. The citric acid makes it more alkaline in the body. Very, very counterintuitive when you look at these lists. But these are based on actual studies of their effects on bodies. So most acid are sugars, table salt, but sea salt's very alkaline. So the forms you use affect what they do. So for health restoration, 80% of the diet should be alkaline forming. For health maintenance, at least 60%. And functional doses for bones. These are the nutrients proven to be needed for bone health. This is your typical protein recommendation, about 0.8 gram per kilogram of body weight. So let's say you're 60 kilograms, your body weight, you need about 48, roughly 50 grams of protein a day. You know, a kilogram is about 2.2 pounds. Calcium, you need about the RDA. Magnesium, you need about the RDA. Zinc, you need about the RDA. Copper, you need about the RDA. Boron, manganese, you need more than the RDA. Potassium, you need about the RDA. A lot of us do not get enough potassium because we're not eating enough plant foods. Most of us do not get enough magnesium. Vitamin D, over 500 IU daily, which is now below the RDA. Again, they're recommending at least the RDA for vitamin K, and they're talking about K1 only. They're not even talking about K2. Vitamin C, at least 500 milligram. Vitamin A, 2,000 to 3,000 IU a day. And just so you know, we are testing for minerals and metals. We have accredited labs for chemical and biological testing, and the chemical testing includes things like minerals and heavy metals. This is our heavy metal testing. So every one of our products is tested for heavy metals, whether it's a mineral product or not. because we want to make sure there's no heavy metals in our green products. We want to make sure there's no heavy metals in our proteins. It doesn't have to be a mineral product. So with that, I see there's some chat questions. We'll see what's going on here. If there's any questions and anyone wants to raise their hand or unmute themselves, feel free.
I'm going to check the Facebook live stream, see if there's any chat soon.
Well, appreciate you folks joining us today, and I hope this is useful. I'll bet everyone learned something about the vitamin D shadow rule, if nothing else.
Yeah, you know, you always think vitamins, but today's presentation really brought out the importance of minerals, which are just so beneficial. And I learned so much. Thank you so much, Neil.
Glad to share what I know. This is I think people need to know some of this stuff. You need to know why you need vitamin D beyond bone health and how to get it. You know, it's in the food supply, but people think, well, I'll just go out in the sun and get it. You go on and go hiking on Mount Rainier in December, you're not going to get any. It doesn't matter if you're wearing short sleeves and cargo shorts.
Exactly. Yeah, that chart, I had discovered that earlier this year. I think it was your other presentation on vitamin D, and I was just blown away. I was like, this makes so much sense. And you know, that's why now would be the best time to start getting that vitamin D in, because we are starting to lose light up here. And especially like how it was definitely November, December, January, and February. And you're located in Chicago, right?
Yes.
So
Well, yeah,
yeah.
from about the equinox to the next equinox, that's when you cannot make vitamin D. Thursday night is the equinox, the fall equinox.
That's right. We are about to fall into it.
That's when the angle of the sun starts shrinking.
So the equinox equals no vitamin D production
Between the
own.
fall and the spring ones, yes. Roughly. Within a few days.
Little...
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like there might be like a hint of sunshine, but that's where Now Foods comes in, especially because y'all are always providing the best high quality products and at a good affordable price.
Yeah, and actually measuring vitamin D requires very expensive equipment, even though it's a very inexpensive vitamin. So, you know, that's a problem because a lot of companies are not using sophisticated methods to measure vitamin D. They're getting ballpark numbers. I mean, we're talking about like $500,000 instruments to measure a product that sells for $5 or $10. So, you know, it's not something most companies want to invest in, but we do so much testing and research. We've got 1,500 products we're selling all over the world. We've really invested. Being a family-owned business, we're able to invest in those capabilities as opposed to worrying about a stock price or giving dividends to shareholders or things like that. And since we're family owned and over 50 years old, we were actually founded 54 years ago, that the company's debt free. So they can actually run on a lower margin and not have to extract money from the consumers to run their business and to expand. And we've got labs that are second to none. We actually develop and publish assays and studies. Some of the most recent are on, one of them is on krill oil testing for freshness and things. Another one, other studies we're doing is looking at glyphosate and pesticides and finding them at lower and lower levels than anyone has been able to detect before. When you're looking at botanicals like herbs and plant materials, there's pigments, there's fats, there's proteins that hide some of the pesticides. We're actually developing new methods with these advanced instruments of finding them in materials like hawthorn and things where the components were hiding the pesticides. You couldn't tell. We're cutting the number of pesticides and the amount that has to be in there for detection so we can make sure that our products are clean and don't have harmful levels of pesticides. And we're sharing those methods with industry. The AOAC, the Analytical Chemistry Organization, we're publishing in their journal.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we're trying to advance the quality, and we don't license or patent our methods. We publish and let anyone use them because we want everyone to be safe.
That's why now is amazing.
Yeah, there's a concept in Tibetan Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism. Have you ever heard that? There's Mahayana and Hinayana. Mahayana means the great ship. Hinayana means small ship. Small ship means I'm going to take care of myself and develop myself and etc. Big ship means we're all in this boat together and we all sink or swim together. So that's not the actual name of the concept that the family it owns now came up with, but I'm just using that as an example of some companies look out for themselves, other companies share and try to look out for everybody.
We are all in this together, and that's why I'm so appreciative for these amazing presentations and folks like you in the community and companies like now that are really trying to make a difference. And because health is wealth and knowledge is power, but also sharing that power of health and wellness is the best gift you can give anybody.
Thanks. Very profound, Elizabeth. Appreciate that. And appreciate Marlene's. I've been going to Marlene's and doing trainings with them for a long time, probably at least 10 or 12 years. And we really appreciate your position there and what you're doing for your customers, and including the education, but also being there as an independent is a very powerful thing. There's so many companies that are corporate, worried about their bottom line more than their customers, and family-owned businesses like Marlene's and now aren't like that. So thank you for being part of that industry and that company.
Thank you so much, Neil. Well, it's always a pleasure working with you. I always learn so much from your presentations, and then it inspires me to learn more. And I know that everyone here today was super grateful as well. And I had put in the comments section, folks, the Now website. There's some really great information on there. And we thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take good care.